G'day legends. In this video, we're going to explore using drum samples in a mix, but not in the typical kind of way that you normally would. A lot of people generally will use drum samples to just straight up replace drum sounds because they're either not happy with them or they just don't really have the skill to mix them and make them sound just the way that they need them to. So they just opt for the easier solution to just replace those live drum sounds with sampled sounds, which, it can sound cool, but sometimes it can sound a little bit robotic as well. But what I want to do is show you a bit of a concept that I've been playing around with drum samples to enhance the original drum sound and not make it sound like it's been smothered in drum samples, basically. So check this out. This is the drum mix, and I'll take my samples in and out so you can hear exactly what's happening. The original drum sound is pretty much intact, but what we're getting is a nice, clean, punchy top end to the sound. We're bringing out the transient attack of the drums, but the rest of the kit sounds pretty much identical. So what I'm doing here is basically using samples as EQ almost, as a little bit of transient designing, but I'm not using them to completely just add a new sound or color to the kit. It's basically just, how can we fill in the gaps that are missing from the original drum sound and enhance them with these samples? So this is what the samples sound like on their own. All right, pretty nasty actually. It does not sound good on its own, but in the context of the mix, it's actually adding all of the things that are missing from what I want to hear out of this drum sound. So without those samples, the drums have a lot less attack. Like, listen to the snare. The snare sound really dark, really rounded out, and for like a kind of rocky snare sound, you want a bit of that crack on the top end. And a lot of the time, we kind of grab an EQ and we boost a high shelf, and then we get a whole bunch of cymbal bleed come in, and then we've got to gate the drums, and then we need to use something like silencer, or we need to use some sort of debleeding trick. And then usually those debleeding tricks have a little bit of a sacrifice to them. You can hear that they kind of choke the drum a little bit, or they kill a little bit of the transient information in the drum, and there's always this little bit of sacrifice. Now, I'm not saying they're not great tools, because they are, and I use them pretty regularly, but this is an idea that I've been playing around with. What if we can try to just keep the raw drum sound and then just add what we need from the samples so that we don't have to boost up all of that nasty stuff? So let's just take a look at the snare to start with. This is my snare sound, and basically I've got a gate on it. There's no EQ in here, there's no compression, basically literally just using the expander gate. Just to chill the hi-hat bleed out a little bit, but that bleed doesn't sound awful there because we haven't added a whole bunch of EQ to it and made it sound all like harsh and sizzly, you know what I mean? It's sort of very natural still at the moment, but the snare's a little bit on the darker side. And then I've just got a Logic EQ, just cleaning up the mids. So we turn this off and on, you'll hear what's going on here. Just tightens it up a little bit, cleans up a little bit of the murky muddiness in the snare drum. But listen to what happens as soon as we add a high shelf to this. It's just like horrible straight away. So much cymbal bleed. It's just not nice. And obviously we can do what I said before. We could add silencer. We could put a harder gate on it. We could do all of those things, but we're usually going to end up still with a bit of that kind of like sort of like, gated high frequency sound, which is kind of annoying. And then you kind of hide it behind a sample, and like, it's okay, you can kind of deal with it. But I'll show you what I'm doing here just to keep the raw natural snare sound, but then get that top end out of it. So basically I've duplicated the snare track, and I've got this track here called Snare Bite. It's the exact same audio file, but I've loaded up Trigger 2 on it. And I've loaded up a snare sample from my Trigger 2 Volume 1 sample pack. Tons of cool samples in there, but I particularly like the snap of this snare drum sound, the joyful noise. I've adjusted the tune to match it in with our recorded snare sound. And just so you can hear, this is what the sample sounds like without any of this extra processing that we do to it. I love that snare sample, so good. But we're not using this sample for how good that sounds. We're actually just using it to create some transient information here. So then our next thing completely erases most of that sound, just a high pass filter all the way up to 1.5K basically. And that's at a 12 dB octave. And then I've just got a high shelf at 8K boosting 3 dBs. Pretty terrible looking EQ, and that sounds like this. Very unpleasant to listen to on its own, but what I'm trying to get here is just the snap, the top end. That's it. I don't need the body. I've got heaps of body from the recorded snare drum, but I'm missing the snappy top end. So that's what I'm looking for here. And then I've also added Softtube's Transient Designer, and I'm just pushing the punch to just make it a little bit snappier, a little bit tighter sounding. Just makes that transient hit a little bit harder. I really want that kind of rim shot, snappy sound to come through. But that's all I've done on this. I've just boosted the punch. But let's turn this all the way down and I'll blend it in so you can hear what it does. So it's cool, right? It still sounds like the original snare drum, but it just sounds like it's now got a bunch of EQ on the top end and it's just snapping through the mix. But we're not fighting with all of that yucky bleed stuff that we get when we boost a bunch of EQ into a recorded snare drum. So I think that's a pretty cool way of using drum samples to retain the original sound but enhance that top end. Now I'm doing the exact same thing for my toms. Now I'm using toms from my Birch Babinga sample pack that I have pitched to the recorded drums. You can see I've tuned these down a little bit. The recorded drums are tuned a little bit lower than these ones. But again, we've got similar EQs straight after. So what we're trying to achieve here is bring out that slappy stick sound, hearing the contact of the stick on the tom. Again, it sounds absolutely terrible on its own, but let's turn them all the way down, bring in our recorded tom sounds, and then we're going to blend these in. So again, I think that's really cool. Brings out that clarity in the toms, especially when the full mix is playing. Sometimes the toms get a little lost and they need that high end to help them poke out. And this absolutely helps. And absolutely zero concerns about cymbal bleed and zero concerns that it sounds like I've just layered samples over the top of it. And lastly, similar thing with the kick, okay? So let me show you what we're doing here. We've got a kick in and a kick out mic and they don't sound bad at all. Now I've got two triggers on the kick here. One of these we may not really need, but I wanted to show you it as a bit of a concept and an idea that you could do. For example, if we didn't have that kick out mic, then this one would really be beneficial. So again, I've duplicated that kick in channel and then I've loaded up Trigger 2 on it and I've loaded up one of my samples from the Trigger 2 Volume 1 sample pack called the Fat Boy Kick. So just a nice punchy kick sound without being like too modernized with heaps of bright top end on it. But anyway, what we're doing with that one is we're doing the opposite. We're doing a low pass filter and dragging it all the way down to 117 Hertz is where I've stopped it. So essentially, we're making a little bit of a sub mic, just really focusing in on that low end punch. Now, if you wanted to, you could bring that right down lower and you could shape it more and get really sub heavy, but where it was, I think sounds pretty cool. It makes the kick nice and punchy. So I'm going to turn this down and blend it in with our kick in mic. So it just gives it a little bit more low end punch, which is cool if you're lacking that. Now we've duplicated the channel again, and this time I've grabbed a different kick. I've actually gone with the Ludwig Modern. And this is another sample from my Trigger 2 Volume 1 sample pack. And this is what that sample sounds like. Nice punchy kick sound. Okay, and then some EQ, and look, this almost looks like one of those advertisement EQs for FabFilter, but it really doesn't matter what you do here as long as you kind of get the sound that you want to blend in with the drum. So I've got a high pass filter up to 950 Hertz, really getting rid of the low end and the low mids, and then I've cut away quite a deep cut at 3K, so just kind of like a bit of harshness in the kick sound there that we don't really need because I think we've got enough of that in the actual kick sound. And then I'm boosting in some airy top end of the kick, about 9 dBs at 10K with a bell as well, and then a low pass filter, just chopping off pretty much anything above 12K. It's literally just that click sound of the kick. Now let's blend that in with our kick mics. It's really cool, gives it a whole bunch of clarity, especially when you've got the full kit going. That's just a cool way of being able to balance that out and get that top end sitting just right with the kick in the mix. So again, this is what our drum samples are adding to this mix. So one more time, let's listen to the original drum sound without the samples, and then when I bring them in, have a listen to how the drums just get enhanced. They don't actually change, they just become snappier. I'm just getting more transient punch out of them, but the actual tonality of the kit and all of the ringing of the snare, all of the mid-range, it's all part of the original sound. So I think that's a cool concept because the original drum sound is really intact to me. We're just getting that top end that we always try to bring out with a bit of EQ. Quick example in the context of the mix. So to my ears, that's doing exactly what I want it to do. It's giving the drums some nice cracky top end, but I'm getting all of the flavor of the drums that I recorded. If you guys found this interesting or helpful at all, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to try this technique out for yourself and you need some sweet drum samples and you want to support this channel at the same time, then hit that link in the description below. You can head over to my website. You can check out that Trigger 2 Volume 1 sample pack, the Birch for Binga sample pack. There's a whole bunch of cool drum sample packs over there and mixing courses as well. So grabbing any of that stuff really does help support the time that goes into making content just like this. If you want to check out any of those sample packs, and check out this next video coming up.